So hello everyone, and thanks ever so much for joining us on today's webinar. We'll start with some brief introductions. I'm really pleased to be joined on the call today by Thomas Psaropoulos. For the last 20 years, he's worked across multiple sectors and works with businesses to invent and simplify end-to-end technology-driven solutions that ultimately provide a better customer and employee experience. As for myself, I'm Rob Shropshire and lead new business and account management in the UK and Ireland. So quick run through of the agenda. First of all, we'd welcome any questions. Please just type them in the chat box and we'll answer them towards the end of the session. I'll start off with giving you a high level overview, leaning on the last few months to share some insight with you all, which I hope you'll find interesting. We'll then get on to the good stuff and Thomas will share a case study with you all. I'll then wrap up with a summary and open up for some questions. From start to finish, the webinar will be lasting 30 minutes. So to start with, perhaps stating the obvious, yes, business has changed. And if the world was not already moving to a more digital world, it certainly is now. All over the news, we're seeing businesses adapt and change to serve their customers. And although our example today is focused on retail, I don't think there are many industries that have not been affected by recent events and can't take something out of today. Supply chains have been tested across multiple industries, from people needing PPE, computer equipment, food deliveries, and many of you might recall queuing for basic things like toilet roll and the mad rush down the aisle to see whether you were in luck on that particular day. And of course, they were unprecedented times and still are, but what was key was the ability to quickly adapt, and supermarkets had to almost tweak their supply chains overnight, ordering more of certain items, but also restricting the amount of choice that consumers had to make sure that all of the essential items were in stock. Then, of course, buying behaviours completely changed. For those of you that enjoy hearing stats, McKinsey & Company found that 18% of people have been trying new brands, and 64% of people continue on doing so. Perhaps customers will become less loyal in the future, and businesses must work harder to keep them. The biggest change is the amount of online sales that are now expected, and we need to make sure that we have the technology in place to handle that. And of course, the way in which we help and serve our customers has changed dramatically. Those that had already invested in getting their systems online, cloud technology, and video conferencing tools probably found they're already ahead of the game. I'd certainly love to be at Zoom's Christmas party this year, given their performance over the last couple of months. The role of technology was key here and underpinned all of those three areas and affected your ability either positively or negatively to respond to these changes in your respective sectors. We've also seen businesses adapt how they deliver services and products. Being British, I was absolutely delighted with the news that pubs could reopen. But now when you walk inside, you walk straight to your table, you order drinks and food on an app and scan a QR code for track and trace purposes. There are, of course, many other examples. And along with the sudden pressure on technology and the need to change quickly, businesses don't necessarily have the luxury of spending more. In fact, many face reduced budgets through no fault of their own, and any large investments have been put on hold, with most budget now reserved for keeping the lights on. So how do we innovate with limited resources? So to summarize, people's behaviors have changed, speed is key, and we have less resources. But change was always coming in my view. Amazon knew that people wanted items quickly, introducing one-click buy and Amazon Prime delivery. Deliveroo knew that people wanted to see where their food was on a map. They also knew that people wanted restaurant quality food without having to go inside. And Nike have long seen the importance of being agile since the middle of 2017. They saw innovation and speed as key to achieving their growth plans. You can see the results as they started to increase direct connections with consumers and increase the speed at which they were able to deliver those solutions. Examples include building running apps, allowing consumers to customize trainers, creating digital fitness challenges, and streaming live workouts. And despite the initial slump caused by the crisis, their share price has recently climbed 11%. It's also interesting that their chosen CEO back in October 2019 was also the CEO of eBay for a number of years. Further signs that IT leadership and ownership of your own innovation is a crucial component in the success of a modern enterprise. So how do we get there? If we want to be agile, we need to look in our organization. We need the right teams in place. We need to engage our end users to get their buy-in. And we need to focus on a culture of innovation and sharing ideas. We need the process in place that allows us to build, test, and deploy solutions quickly. And we can't do that by scoping out the next big thing for it to take years to develop. People lose patience, and by the time it's finally deployed, the requirements of the business have now changed. And finally, we need to look at technology or a toolkit that allows us to do that. Which leads me nicely to pass over to Thomas, who will explain how a European retailer has implemented the Neptune platform to become more agile.
Thank you, Rob. Hello, everybody. Can you see my screen? Yes, thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for joining today. I'd like to put some of Rob's ideas into context using a real case scenario, a European retailer who operates in the UK market and has been through this challenge over the last about 18 months, I guess, when the journey started. And just to put a little bit more context, we are talking about a nationwide retailer focusing on the home improvement market with an online presence and with nationwide stores with a strong mind share in the UK consumers in terms of home improvement products. And fairly large, it's about £1 billion size and thereabouts, has been in the last few years, with about 6,000 employees. And kind of increasing sometimes as you reach seasonal demand, peak seasonal demand, it can increase as much as 7,500 to 8,000 people. And roughly about 20,000 products, again, flexing to larger numbers as you approach, for example, Christmas, and you have lots of Christmas products. So a fairly sizable retailer targeting the whole of the UK consumer market. So if you were to try to look at their use case from a different perspective, rather than just the dry store numbers and employees, you can start seeing that they trying to solve a bigger problem that covers all of their operations, all of their partners, and addressing the customers, which eventually you could translate into a very large number of API requests, let's put it that way. And from a technologist point of view, you need to start thinking about how is this national retailer going to translate into a technology stack that can respond to its demands. And that's the thinking process that went through when we tried to see how we can produce a new technology stack. And I can tell you 25 billion requests, which I put there at the bottom, I'm not going to bore you with the details above because there were lots and lots more metrics, is pretty small actually. And you should be considering, if you look at here, we have an 8-fold increase recently because of COVID-19 for digital sales. You need to be thinking about the next 5 to 10 years, and this traffic could easily be 250 billion requests. So you need to think about what is that I'm building here over the long term. And let's have a look at some of the challenges first, though, before we go to what is that they did to address the concerns. You know, how do you build a stack with not too much money? Let's put it that way. So this particular retailer suffered from, like many other retailers, from a disjointed customer experience. What that means is that if you try to address the company, say through a Facebook message complaining about an order that went wrong, and then you try again through email, you might discover over time, it wouldn't be immediately obvious, you might discover over time that you're talking to two different people and they seem to be unaware of the two messages. And that is widespread throughout all of the systems that they use. And over time, the customer becomes aware of this. And then progressively you lose trust. And the difficulty there is that you know all this and you want to fix it, but you can't really do it overnight. You can't just reorganize your entire application stack, which is 200 to 300 applications. So you need something, dare I say, to start gluing things together before you make more long-term progress to resolve your stack. So it's better joined together. So the customer does suffer a bit, but also the employees suffered a bit because a lot of the technology was deployed 10 years ago, and it looked like it was from 10 years ago, unfortunately, with text-based RF guns for in-store operations, with aging screens that looked like they were developed 15 years ago because they were actually developed 15 years ago. And that kind of starts coming through when you're dealing with a customer, because all of us are used to consumer-grade applications, and we know how easy it is to book a taxi through Uber. And we do have expectations that our in-house systems are just as smooth and slick. But in this case, they weren't. And again, that seeps through the customer experience little by little. And all of that didn't just happen by accident. It's, as I mentioned, 200 to 300 applications, a mix of ERP systems, SAP, Oracle, and a variety of ancillary ERP solutions, all of them very useful and valuable with still good functions, but progressively becoming technical debt. And by that, I mean, every time you want to build something new, like a fulfillment solution, for example, you find that you have to go and spend a month in discovery, and you have a lot of single points of failure that are your subject matter experts, and it takes 6 months to develop, and quite a lot of effort and money to integrate all of the disparate pieces. And as a result, you realize that you have an unwieldy landscape that you struggle to evolve with. And you start becoming, you stagnate, you become static, you cannot seem to progress forward. And to make matters worse, in this particular case, the workforce was mature. And by that, I mean not age-wise, it's more skills-wise. As you have a mature stack, you also have mature skills. Again, single points of failure. And then you realize that wouldn't it be better if I had full stack engineers that just can be swapped around and cover the whole area of business rather than just focusing on fulfillment, on ordering, or HR, and so on. So a lot of retraining is required to be able to build new technologies using modern IT practices, but you discover then that you need 6 months, 12 months, 18 months to transition these resources, and that becomes very expensive. That's a problem, so you need something to get there faster. And last, but probably the most important thing here is because a lot of retailers are under stress these days because of Amazon, because of COVID, and just generally because of thin margins. It's frugality, it's a desire to be frugal. You cannot expect to lay out a huge capital investment up front. You need to have low year one costs when you invest. Typically, in this particular case, we were looking for to realize hard benefits faster than usual. And I'm not talking just about soft productivity, which is difficult to quantify sometimes. I'm talking about cost reduction, achieving more sales, better margins, the real stuff. And you also need flexibility with licensing. You need to be able to use a CapEx model, for example, if your tax arrangements are such that you can absorb the depreciation in your EBITDA calculations in such a way that makes the impact to the cash flow advantageous. So you need to have a lot of flexibility. Maybe you're happy with an OpEx model, but you want your provider to be very flexible to give you either OpEx or CapEx or a mix of both if that's necessary. And also the other thing that's very important when you're trying to invest in a new technology, a new platform, is not to have hidden extras. Because one of the things you discover as you start your journey, things like identity management or mobile device management tend to be extra. And before you know it, $250,000 gets to be paid for subscription fees that you didn't necessarily anticipate when you started the journey. So you ideally want to have a limited exposure to all of this. So that's quite a lot of challenges. And this particular retailer wanted to address effectively, to reach out comprehensively and quickly to its customers, colleagues, and partners, and wanted to start with colleagues because that's kind of a little bit easier to make some headway into. and to start delivering effective applications, compelling applications that deliver value, direct value ultimately to the customer. That's, in the end, it's all about the customer. So it is important to consider the need for a new technology stack, because your old stack just doesn't work anymore. So you need to figure out, what is that I need to do to be able to deliver useful applications to my team? And the answer is that if we want to do this quickly and effectively and without spending 18 months baking it and disappearing into a black hole and then coming back with very little to show for, you probably these days need what is called by Gartner a multi-experience development platform, which is, I guess, a mouthful for saying a rapid application development environment. You need to be able to turn around applications fast, and they need to be good. And the ultimate prize here is it needs to be cross-platform. It needs to deploy, the same app. You build it once, and you need to be able to deploy it in a native mobile setting. You need to deploy it on a desktop application. You need to deploy it on any mobile phone, operating system, any orientation, any geometry, without having to worry about Samsung this, iPhone 6, and iPhone 7, and iPads. Build once, deploy to absolutely everything. That's the ultimate prize. And Neptune did help that. In this particular case, after reviewing a lot of platforms, Neptune was great. It delivered everything that I just described here. But that's not enough. So you building an app is just half the job done. You also have a fairly complex backend, which needs to be somehow integrated into your apps. And every retailer, and for that matter, every business, be it banking, insurance, you name it, there'll be an element of some sort of ERP system, warehousing systems, if there's inventory involved. You have fulfillment services to take care of, general office applications, email, and so on. You have payments, banking, you have social media, e-commerce, headless or not. And all of this somehow needs to be reintegrated back to your app stack, the new apps you deliver. Otherwise, you're just building little applications which don't connect to your background. The last thing you want to do in all this is somehow surface your backend onto your apps. And we'll see why that's a problem. And to be able to achieve that, you want to aim for an abstraction layer, something that you can represent your backend in such a way that doesn't surface directly to your apps. And that is quite common. This is nothing new here. I'm not reporting something that is brand new. Everybody's been doing it for years and years. So that's the microservices layer to abstract business logic, to provide a layer of business services to expose to your applications so they can be consumed. And the purpose of that is to sanitize your opinionated backend. So you don't want your app to know how SAP does inventory or how Oracle does inventory. You just want to know how you do inventory the way your company does it. So it's a sanitized business service. And once again, you need to build that. That's not easy. 5 years ago, if you study how people went about it, they had to work really hard to build a lot of technology to make it happen. But these days, thanks to applications like Neptune, you can just shortcut a lot of this and just focus on delivering your services. So that's very important. And I think that's very important if you want to get moving quickly rather than just playing with technology a lot. Also, remember the training element. You don't want to spend 12 months building technology and disappearing into some sort of black hole and coming back with very little to show for. And so Neptune came in very nicely to organize the application layer and the service layer. And then we just kind of finished it off by putting an edge security layer between apps and services, which is that's an API management layer, a facade to allow you to abstract your services so you don't expose your valuable assets to the world. And all of this was put on the cloud. So that's containerized applications, so you can auto-scale, auto-heal your applications and your services. So again, quite a common approach these days, and done very easy it can be done very easily if you subscribe to a service such as Kubernetes on Azure or AWS or Google Cloud. And I think Neptune supports all three of them. So let's have a look. So we end up in the end with something like this. This is, for those in the know, the typical sort of 3-layer stack that was pushed forward by MuleSoft, and it's widely adopted throughout the industry. And the idea is that you have your applications at the top, which then talk to your facade. So for example, you have a customer who wants to create an account. So your application will talk to what we call the Experience API. and that will then pass on the request to your business services, which is where the real value is, the description of your business. And ultimately, that will talk to some backend system to go and create the account. Now, you could create the account with the service layer and act as a system of record, or you could just put it, say, down in SAP or some other database that you operate, or a little bit of both, as we'll see in a minute. The most important takeaway from this approach, this architecture, is that you're decoupling your application layer from your backend. So your applications are completely agnostic as to what's going on down here. That's very important because you could decide tomorrow to switch out of SAP and invest in a different ERP system, and you can do this without your app ever noticing. You shouldn't have to test this to the death. You probably need to do a basic regression test, and all of a sudden you have a stack that is that lasts longer without being heavily dependent on specific components that might age faster. So let's take a good sort of a very simple example, kind of to put it into better context. Let's pretend that you work in a store and you're moving around with your mobile phone, and a customer comes up to you and asks, "Oh, can you tell me a bit about this product? I can't find any information." Says, "No problem. I'm just going to go to my app." You just scan the product, and the app then passes the request down to your API gateway, the facade I mentioned earlier, which kind of forms a very nice looking API, which is very typical to what you see from other companies. And it basically says, "Tell me something through your API about this product that I just scanned up here." And the app passes the request down to the gateway proxies the request down to your microservice. This is where you start building in the value, because the microservice acts as an abstraction layer to your backend. And what it does quite a lot of things in this case. Because the information is fragmented, remember we have 300 systems here, and we need to combine information from multiple places. Rather than having the app doing it, you have the microservice doing all of that. So it composes all this information and goes to SAP through in this particular case, Neptune had a fantastic SAP connector, which abstracts SAP, turns it into a REST API, which is the right way of doing it. And then you talk to some PLM system. This was a bespoke SQL Server type of PIM system. And your e-commerce, which has some, a view of what the product looks like, rich information, images, and stuff like this. So it couples it all together, composes it, and serves it back to the app, and gives it back to the employee. All of this in an instant, and the employee then can look at the app and talk back to the customer and say, "Yes, this is what you need to know." So that's how this works. This is a very simplified example, and of course, there's a lot more going on with orchestrating services and so on. But in a principle, this is what you're aiming to achieve. And again, the lesson here is that you're decoupling. You're decoupling your application stack from your backend. So you can remove the backend as and when you need it. So this was an example of a store app, and let's have a look, where we ended up with this particular retailer. So pre-COVID-19, a plan was in motion to start developing apps. And the first instance was to develop a store app, pretty much what I was just talking about. And you can see, this wasn't a timid app. There's a lot going on here. Customer appointments, you have availability checks, checking stock position, real time, click and collect processing, labels, a lot of things going on. Where's my order, store information, and so on and so on. And then the next iteration, within a few months, you can see how the platform works really fast now. So it's not you don't wait 12 months, within 2 quarters, you're going to the next level up. And you start building up more streams. You're building a vendor collaboration up for B2B applications. So you're integrating with your suppliers now to do invoicing, you share purchase orders, and then you just fan out. You start really pushing the envelope now. And you can see a lot of the services that you see here, or everything in these yellow boxes are services. You can start seeing towards the end, most of them are not bold anymore. What that means is that you're reusing things that you've built already. So you produce that employee microservice here to do things up with holiday management or absences and so on, and now you're reusing it for other things. So you don't have to go back and build from scratch. So within 18 months, 24 months, you probably find yourself reusing a lot of what you built in the first few months. So you end up probably with about 100, 200 services, and then you're just really capitalizing what you've already built. So very powerful architecture. So at the end of all of this, things started to look better, definitely. Instead of being disjointed, now you still have 200 systems that are disjointed, but you're using now Neptune for the microservice layer, which acts as the glue, and that starts bringing things together. And it's not the ultimate resolution, but it buys you time to rethink your overall stack. And your consumer, your experience at the store, but also at the consumer level, is instantly better, because obviously Neptune uses SAP's OpenUI 5, which is really top quality with 100 pre-built components, and that allows you to instantly produce consumer-grade looking apps. So it's an instant upgrade. It deploys to any OS, Windows, Android, and Windows 10, any orientation, all of that taken care of. And you can use plugins, for example, Scandit for barcode processing if you're a retailer. It's a top plugin to use to achieve really good operation when it comes to scanning. Your landscape is start being more rational. Again, because of the microservice layer, you can give your backend system the new lease of life, and you don't have to worry about spaghetti middleware anymore, which you're going to start, in fact, decommissioning as you start using more and more microservices. And your workforce, even though it's still mature and they're still kind of learning new skills, they got a leg up, because with Neptune, you first of all get a Node.js on steroid system. But because of the rich UI, you can build APIs very quickly. You can write code without all the nitty-gritty that you have to do to get it going. And you truly get, within a few weeks, we were able to start writing code. And that means fast adoption. And you end up with full stack engineers, because the person who writes apps and the person who writes microservices, they already know how to do one or the other, because it's one application doing both. So you're just building full stack engineers from the get-go. And importantly, it doesn't break the bank. It's very cost effective. All the expensive add-ins like identity management, MDM that I mentioned earlier, all of these things are kind of built in to a large degree. They may not be as good as a separate provider, but they're very well thought of. And they can definitely cut short the delivery time and the costs to it. So overall then, it really helped to be able to go from dreaming to designing and then to actually delivering. And within 6 months, you can actually start producing compelling applications that really speak to the customer. So very pleased with the overall results, and I think the journey is ongoing. So, and that was the experience. So positive all around. And one last thing I wanted to mention is that the Norwegian team, the people who built it, are really one of the most personable people I've ever worked with. They replied to all of our requests, and were very friendly. I mean, I never expected to speak to a CEO of the company twice, to bombard him for hours with my problems, but yet, they were very responsive and excellent team, very, very happy with them. So, Rob, over to you.
Thank you very much, Thomas, and there will be some time shortly to ask additional questions on that if you have them. So bear with me for the next 2 minutes, and then we'll get on to questions. So I think what you've, I guess, seen today is how the Neptune platform has allowed the retailer to become more agile and deliver value to the business quickly. And many analysts are starting to point to low-code platforms as a vehicle to drive that agility and innovation. And Gartner suggests 1 in 3 enterprises will be using those sorts of tools by 2024. And I'm really pleased to announce on that note that we are now recognized within the Gartner Magic Quadrant for multi-experience development platforms as one of only 16 vendors that made the cut. And I've not told you a great deal about Neptune so far, so allow me to explain in just one slide. The Neptune platform saves you a significant amount of time building applications due to our extensive library of template apps and low-code drag and drop approach. You've seen today that we fit in with your existing IT landscape and allow you to get more value out of what you already have. Incredibly important during these times. You build once and the application will scale to whatever device you're using. And we also provide offline capabilities, which is crucial in many sectors. We provide a powerful workflow tool, which can be used to orchestrate processes across multiple systems. And better still, it's a no-code approach, so you can get your business leaders and operational teams involved in that process. And finally, it's very easy to use. And on average, people get up to speed within about 3 to 5 days. So final takeaways, agility is key and you need the tools in place that help you with this. Low code is an enabler and it could support you in your quest to become more agile. And finally, and arguably most importantly, is that you need to work with what you have and in some cases do more with less. And the case study today was a perfect example of that. So if you're interested in what you've heard today, then please reach out for an informal conversation, opt in for white papers and invites to future events. And finally, if you want to start using the platform and having a go with it, feel free to head on to our website and download our free trial, which can be a really good way of starting to build applications and build a business case in your respective businesses. And of course, the Neptune team would be happy to assist you with that as well. So finally, thanks everyone for attending. If you haven't done so already, then please start putting your questions in the question box now. We have had a few come in already, so we'll move over to QA. So the first question, most of these are for you, Thomas, was how easy was it to start using Neptune? You mentioned building lots of microservices, and I wanted to explain, wanted you to explain how that would work in the platform.
Yes, of course. It was very easy. I'm pleasantly surprised. I was expecting a very complicated installation process, talking to technical people. None of that. It was a simple download, which can go in any operating system or Docker. And it was really within a few minutes of downloading, you start using it. And then for microservices in particular, it was one of the things you realize is that most microservice runtimes out there are based on things like Java, Node.js, or Golang to kind of put some more technical slant to it. And Neptune is effectively Node.js on super steroids with a UI on top of it. So it becomes obvious that you already have the ingredients baked to build a microservice runtime. And if you look at what a microservice is, it's basically a web service to do HTTP requests with a service API on top of it. And then you have a lot of things within, like a private database to be able to script logic within, to have connectivity to, say, an email, SMTP service, notifications, and all of this, and workflow, and lots of other things like that. And all of this is already in, and it's accessible by the user interface. So I was able to build a microservice for fulfillment. That was the first kind of trial we did very, very quickly. I just designed the API and then built the logic behind it, and it was just working within a few days. So it was very easy. And then you can actually see how you can deploy 100 of these, because once you have a repeatable method, kind of you need to construct a pattern, how you compose backend services, how you orchestrate other microservices. It's once you kind of work through all of that, which is all in the public domain, to be honest, there's nothing hidden here, then you can really start churning them out like popcorn. So it was quite easy. I was pleasantly surprised because you feel a bit apprehensive. Microservices, it sounds like you have to spend 2 years learning. None of that. It was quite easy.
Thanks, Thomas. And I've got another question for you, I think particularly important during these times, but you mentioned lots of benefits in your presentation. I think you talked about frugality, user experience, and a few others. Which one was the most important benefit in terms of ultimately justifying the business case for the investment?
I guess it was a combination of, first of all, the company needed a way forward. It needed to know that there is light at the end of the tunnel, because with your existing stack, you couldn't see that. How can we build anything? We're stuck, we're just paralyzed. We cannot deploy anything without 6 months and £500,000. The smallest thing, it's just crazy. So Neptune provided a lot of the things that we needed to join up together very quickly and start producing meaningful applications. So that was one thing, very important benefit to know that if you invest in this, you will actually get something in return and quickly. Because a lot of people sell you platforms and technologies, and then it's difficult to see how you're going to produce anything meaningful out of it. You could easily spend 12 months learning stuff and not producing. So that was, we realized that, especially with the DXP SAP connector, because we were an SAP shop, you could see how you can connect fast and produce results quickly. So that was one thing very important. The second one was frugality, hugely important, because, like I mentioned, retailers are under stress. You don't have unlimited funds. You have to make your buck work. And in this case, it did. And the flexibility with licensing, it mattered a great deal. How can we impact our cash flow in a way that doesn't offend the finance director? Let's put it that way. So these two elements, frugality and the platform's ability to deliver what it says that it can.
Thanks, Thomas. So I know we're running over time. We'll answer one more question, but feel free to reach out to us if you've got any others. So there's a question that comes in that I will take, which is just further details on the trial. I didn't explain that on any in any great detail. So it is a free trial. You get all of the functionality that you need to build apps. So none of the functionality is restricted in that sense. It's restricted to licenses. So go ahead and download that from our website. I'm happy to support you if you need help with that. The other thing to mention is we've got quite an extensive e-learning portal and almost like a crash course on teaching you how to use the platform. There's quite a big community there as well if you need to ask questions and all of that sort of thing. So there's a lot of resources for you to sort of get going and start now. So based on time, I'm going to wrap up there. Thanks so much for everyone that has attended. You will be getting sent out an on-demand version of that as well. So if you want to distribute that to your colleagues, then feel free to do that. We'll also follow up with you separately just to see if you need any help and provide our contact details. So if there were extra questions that perhaps you didn't ask today, we can certainly get those answered. So once again, thanks ever so much for your time, and we hope to see you on the next webinar. Thanks ever so much.